what self-care actually looks like.
Anything that feeds your soul.
And it's as unique as we are.
In a way that actually helps you build a life that works for you.
Our own unique minds and bodies. There's no right or wrong or some set formula you have to follow.
Some of the ways that are maybe a little bit out of the norm.
It looks different for each of us because each of us are different.
Hey there, I'm Reverend Dan. We are Soul Evolution Collaborative, a nonprofit based in universal spiritual principles, offering possibilities for navigating the evolution of life in an authentic and intentional way. And this is Truth Be Told 2.0, a weekly series that is changing the norms, bringing you inspiring and uplifting messages to look at life a little differently. This is our second episode in our series on self-care, looking at what it is, what it isn't, and kind of everything in between. Last week, we looked at the history and the evolution of self-care, from the activism of the Black Panthers through the rebranding of the 90s and early 2000s, where self-help kind of took on this mainstream activity. And so it seems self-care is looking to go through a little bit more of an evolution, that the self-care of the late 90s and early 2000s may not be working so well anymore, if it ever did, right? Self-care has kind of turned into this aftercare. We work, and then need to pamper and rest and rejuvenate. Well, if it ever was working, it's certainly not working now. So what is self-care now? What does self-care actually look like today and into the future? So let's talk about it. What does self-care look like now? So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Truth Be Told 2.0.
So let's talk a little bit about what self-care actually looks like in our everyday lives. And there's so many layers and categories and all that sort of thing when it comes to self-care and how it looks. And it's as unique as we are. We have our own unique minds and bodies and emotions and ways of being. And so self-care, there's no right or wrong or some set formula you have to follow. It looks different for each of us because each of us are different. So I want to talk about 3 areas of self-care and what it may look like and how it may show up in our lives. We're going to talk about physical, we're going to talk about mental, and we're going to talk about emotional self-care. So I think a lot of us are really familiar with this idea of physical self-care, resting when we need to, getting good sleep, eating the foods that nourish our body, and that is right on track. And it's really important to note that we're all different. So different foods support different people, different ways of moving our bodies support different people, different levels or types of sleep or length of sleep. We're all different. And so really physical self-care is really beginning to get in tune with your own body and what it needs. Oftentimes I ask myself, what do I need in this moment? Asking my body, that is. And then I begin to listen. What does my body need? Does it need this type of food? Does it need maybe a nap? Does it need this type of relaxation technique? I think it's just being curious about our physical bodies and ways that we can support it. And so that we're not doing aftercare, recuperating from damaging our bodies or for pushing ourselves too hard, but instead we are gently treating our bodies as the honoring thing that they are as we go about our daily lives. And this really is key when we understand our bodies and what supports it. And so that's some of the ways that physical self-care can show up. Another aspect of self-care is emotional self-care. Now, for me, this looks like expressing our emotions without judgment, not trying to suppress them or hide them or avoid them like some of us may do, myself included, because none of us wants to feel bad or to express difficult emotions or challenging emotions, but all of our emotions are key to our emotional self-care. It's the way our body expresses itself and navigates life, the challenging times, the triumphant and amazing times. The whole spectrum, our emotions support us in navigating this thing that we call life. And so it's really important in emotional self-care to allow ourselves to feel those emotions, and also to allow others to do the same. That's when kind of self-care kind of morphs into community care. When we begin to practice the supportive care in our everyday lives, we invite other people to do the same. And it's kind of contagious. Self-care is like that. And so emotional self-care is just being able to learn to be comfortable with all of our emotions. And it may take a little practice, for some of us more practice than others, but there are so many ways that we can do that and begin to support ourselves in freely expressing our emotions, because it is an integral part of who we are. Another aspect of self-care is mental self-care. Now, this can look like participating in activities, creative outlets, whether it be art or crafts or music, or talking with friends, or social activities, activities that challenge and inspire our minds. This is all part of mental self-care. This is treating our minds as the unique little thing that it is and asking it what it needs. And so that can show up in a lot of ways, unique to who we are. So really understanding, what does my mind need? What do I need to put into my mind in order to treat it with the gentleness and the care that it needs? Maybe that's being mindful of what we read, what we watch, how we engage, who we engage with. All those things can be part of mental self-care. So we're learning more and more that self-care is more than just bubble baths and massages, even those things are amazing too. But there's so many intricate ways that self-care can show up in our lives. It's so many ways that we can nurture and care for ourselves on all levels of our existence. So next up, we're going to talk about a little bit more about some other areas of self-care and how it shows up in our lives.
While you're here, remember to hit like, subscribe, maybe even drop a comment. We would love to hear from you, and thanks for watching. Let's look at 3 more ways that self-care can show up in our lives that actually help us build lives that work for ourselves. Self-care now, today, can look like spiritual care. Self-care can look like spiritual practices. Really, anything that feeds your soul, whether it is meditation, reading, listening to music, maybe it's going on walks in nature and just kind of reconnecting. Whatever it is that feeds your soul that you are choosing to do intentionally. Engage in whatever speaks to you, right? Find an activity or a practice that really rejuvenates you spiritually. Find something that reminds you of that deep connection that we have to this thing that is greater than us, that really just seems so hard to put words to when you really are in that feeling. Find something that feels like that you can engage in regularly. Self-care can look like saying no. Although many don't like to hear it, saying no can really be one of the most powerful acts of self-care, right? Being true to yourself. Being in touch with what your needs are, currently or looking forward, and saying yes to things that you're really a yes for, and saying no to things that you're really a no for. Saying no can be so powerful, right? You get to say what you mean and mean what you say. And then everything else you say becomes more powerful. Not committing to things that we really don't want to do. Not committing to things we don't have the time for. Not committing to things that, well, maybe we think somebody else wants us to commit to and we don't really want to, but we think we should, so we do it anyway. Saying no can be really powerful. And I think, if I haven't said it enough, saying no can be really powerful. It's one of those things that I think we need to hear over and over, because so many of us are conditioned to be people pleasers and to say yes to everything. Self-care can look like grace. Self-care can look like giving ourselves the grace that we so easily often extend towards others, right? It's that thing that we can so easily give of ourselves to others, but so hard to extend to ourselves. Be gentle with yourself when you're making decisions. Be gentle with yourself when you're taking actions. Be gentle with yourself with the thoughts you're thinking. Maybe it's not right now, maybe it's after the fact. You know, those moments where we're like, I really wish I didn't do that. I really wish I didn't say that. Why am I having these thoughts? Yes, we want to be mindful of our journey and how we're influencing the world around us, and whether it's our own experience or the experience of others around us because of thoughts and actions and things we are going through. And we can probably all learn to give ourselves a little more grace along the way. You know, those moments when we don't hit the mark that we set for ourselves, we can afford to give ourselves a little more grace in those moments where we don't need to be so judgmental of ourselves or critical or beat ourselves up, if that's something you often do. And there are probably so many more ways that you can practice self-care in your life in a way that actually works, in a way that actually helps you build a life that works for you. But we wanted to give you some of the ways that are maybe a little bit out of the norm, outside of that norm of aftercare, of pampering and rejuvenating after the fact, of resting, things that actually build a life now. Ways that are not aftercare, but instead things that we can do now, that we can be actively doing along the way to make our lives a little easier, more energizing and fulfilling and rejuvenative, and ways that require even just a little less rest and aftercare from the systems that aren't really working. So, hope this helps. We'd love to hear from you some ways that you are building self-care practices that work.